You're listening to Voces, Críticas, Critical Voices. I am your producer and host, Silvana Falcón. Today I'm here with Carol Garcia, Program Coordinator for the People of Color Sustainability Collective here at UC Santa Cruz. She received her undergraduate degree in Spanish and Anthropology from UC Davis and is completing a master's degree in Social Sciences from the University of Chicago. Carol is a first-generation Mexican-American born and raised in Salinas, California. She's the granddaughter of migrant farm workers. She is passionate about issues of immigration, labor, the environment, health, and education for communities of color. Welcome, Carol, to Voces Críticas.
Thank you.
So tell us, what is the People of Color Sustainability Collective about?
So the People of Color Sustainability Collective is a collaboration between three entities on campus. So that's the American Indian Resource Center, the Sustainability Office, and Colleges 9 and 10. And the mission of PoCSC is to provide a space on campus for students of color to explore the intersections of environmental issues and social justice. And the initiative came about really from a lack of a space for people of color on campus to engage with sustainability, and students expressing that they were feeling alienated in the current spaces on campus where students engage with sustainability. So that was how it started. It's really an intentional space for people of color to be celebrated in terms of the contributions that they've made to caring for the environment and addressing issues of environmental justice. So that is the thrust of the program, and we have 4 interns who work for PoCSC. And they're the ones who do the programming and events. And that's how we outreach to the entire student population through our programs and events.
And the interns are picked when?
The interns are selected during the summer before the school year starts. So students can reach out to the director of the American Indian Resource Center, Dr. Rebecca Hernandez. She is the one who hires the interns for the People of Color Sustainability Collective.
And so then they're with you for the full academic year?
Yes, that is correct.
That's great. So now, why did you want to join this collective? Why did you want to be part of this team of the People of Color Sustainability Collective? Had you been to UC Santa Cruz before? I know you're from Salinas, but you went to undergrad at Davis. Had you been to this campus before? Or what was drawing you to this position?
I had been on the campus before. My older brother graduated from here a while back, and my youngest sibling is a student here currently. They're an undergrad. But really, my interest in PoCSC stems from my experience growing up in the Salinas Valley. I really identified with PoCSC's missions to acknowledge different forms of being sustainable and different understandings of the environment. And in my household, there were also certain practices that were about reducing waste and thus could be considered sustainable, but that are not included as recognizable sustainable practices within a mainstream understanding of sustainability. So, for example, reusing sour cream plastic containers as Tupperware. And this is one example of some of the practices that students started to mention to the director of the American Indian Resource Center and expressing, this is also about being sustainable. It's about reusing. And it's a form of sustainability that focuses on a certain mindfulness and being intentional about reusing resources. And it's a sustainability that doesn't focus on consumption as some aspects of mainstream sustainability does. So that really resonated with me just from personal experience. And then another reason why I was drawn to PoCSC is that growing up, my parents instilled in my siblings and I an appreciation for nature and the idea that plants and other non-human entities are sentient beings, that plants can have feelings. It's really interesting because when we were younger, my siblings and I, we would disregard this particular teaching from our parents, and we would cut a flower or a leaf to upset them. And now that I'm older, I can really appreciate this teaching and recognize it as valid. So when I learned about PoCSC, I also thought of it as a platform for students on this campus specifically to share the knowledge about the environment that they've learned at home and within their communities. So really the mission of PoCSC resonated with my personal experiences growing up in the Salinas Valley.
That's a beautiful story to talk about your parents, because I think we often disregard those lessons from our families. And clearly you had a really beautiful lesson there, and that now you have taken on as kind of a personal mission. That's really great. So now in your role as a coordinator, what are some of the events and the initiatives that you have lined up with the team?
So we're currently organizing an event in the winter quarter with Maya Harjo. Maya Harjo is the food waste coordinator at the Cultural Conservancy. And the Cultural Conservancy is a Native-led nonprofit organization based in San Francisco that does work around the revitalization of indigenous cultures and foodways. So Maya Hardra will be visiting the campus on February 20th. Location and time are to be determined to talk about the importance of seed preservation within Native communities. Please check back to our website in the beginning of winter quarter, pocsc.ucsc.edu.
And what else do you have in store for the collective?
So as the PoCSC coordinator, I'm also supporting the planning of the Inter-Organizational Sustainability Retreat that will be taking place from January 25th through January 27th at the YMCA Camp Campbell Camp in Boulder Creek. And Inter-Org is organized out of the Sustainability Office, but the PoCSC is collaborating in the planning of the retreat. And it's for any student organization or individual on campus interested in issues of social justice and environmental justice. So we invite anyone, whether you are part of an organization or an individual interested in the topic, to register. It's free. The retreat is funded with the student fee measure 45. Anyone is welcome. This year's theme is Health is Wealth, Paving the Way for Food Equity and Justice. And we also invite any organization or individual interested in hosting a workshop to state that in the RSVP.
Are you accepting RSVPs now?
We are currently accepting RSVPs. The last priority date is December 12th. And anyone interested in the form can reach out to me and I could forward it to them.
Great, thank you. Now, are you aware of any other similar collectives as the People of Color Sustainability Collective here on other UC campuses? I know you have a connection to Davis. I wasn't sure if there was other similar collectives in the UC system.
To my knowledge, our collective is unique in that it brings 3 university departments together. So it brings an Ethnic Resource Center, which is the American Indian Resource Center. It brings together the Sustainability Office and colleges 9 and 10. So to my knowledge, our collective is very unique in that way in its organization.
So now you were born and raised in Salinas, California. What are some of the environmental issues that concern you about your hometown?
Pesticides is certainly one of them. Labor conditions and housing conditions. Salinas is a very large agricultural town, and one of the big problems is housing and having multiple families living in apartments that are run down, that aren't up to standard. So housing is definitely one of the issues that are of concern in Salinas. I do believe that it's an environmental issue and it's certainly a social justice issue. It's very much tied to the form of agricultural production and the amount of labor required for such an intensive industry. So there is the connection, even though it's often not acknowledged, between the agricultural industry and issues such as housing and labor. And that is all tied to health as well. If you're living with too many people in an apartment and the materials that the apartment is built with is not up to standard, all of that is also a health and an environmental issue.
And so I'm sure Salinas has changed a lot since when you grew up there. So tell me a little bit about what changes have you just seen in just your lifetime? How has Salinas been transformed?
There's a lot more activism going on in Salinas currently. There are a lot more nonprofit organizations led by community members, people who grew up there, so they're very knowledgeable of the issues affecting the community. So I would say that's the biggest change. I've seen a lot more youth programs as well. So I think that it is changing. There has been improvements, and it has been, I think, because of the work of nonprofits in the area that are led by community members, by people who grew up there.
And so you're also the granddaughter of migrant farm workers, and you mentioned the issue of pesticides a few minutes ago. Was the topic of pesticides something that your family talked about a lot in terms of its health effects?
I don't recall too many intentional conversations about farm work and its health effects. Certainly not about pesticides specifically. Unfortunately, it wasn't a topic that was discussed.
But now that we do have a bit more knowledge about it, is it something that you talked about more frequently in the community of Salinas?
I do know that it is discussed a lot more. And prior to this position, I was working in Salinas in the community. And there was a lot of discussion, specifically within the health department. I knew a few individuals there who were doing work around chronic illness and chronic pain and working with farm worker families. So it is discussed now, and at the county level and at the city level, there are individuals, for example, within the health department who are doing very intentional work around addressing the health issues that migrant farm worker families face.
You're listening to Carol Garcia, Program Coordinator for the People of Color Sustainability Collective here at UC Santa Cruz. She is a first-generation Mexican-American born and raised in Salinas, California, and the granddaughter of migrant farm workers. She's passionate about issues of immigration, labor, the environment, health, and education among communities of color. So, Carol, why is it important to have a sustainability collective that is being led by people of color?
It is important to have a space such as PoCSC precisely because oftentimes mainstream sustainability organizations and spaces do not address issues that affect communities of color. And it's not anything intentional on anybody else's part. It's just not something that might come up for the people involved in those organizations. So it is not about saying that other sustainability organizations or groups on campus are not doing important work, but it's about providing an intentional space for students of color to learn about and acknowledge the work that people of color have been doing to care for the environment and address issues of social and environmental justice. And it's also a retention tool for our interns and for the students who attend our programming that the university is supporting the initiative and providing the space. It says, something about the commitment that the institution has toward the students. So it's very important to continue supporting the initiative because at the end of the day, it really is a retention tool as well.
You said earlier people of color were doing sustainability work before it was called sustainability. This is now part of the language that we use when we talk about the environment. What other kinds of examples can you share with us?
Most of them focus around this concept of reusing. So whatever in a household, any item in a household that can be reused usually is an example of practices that come up in conversations with the interns and other students on campus. There has also been discussion around navigating the cultural space of going off to college and learning things at college and then coming back and communicating to family members what the new things that you've learned are. So, for example, a few years ago, one of our interns created a Abuelita sustainability story design, and it tells this cultural and generational gap that needs to be bridged when students go off to college and then return home and try to communicate what they've learned at college. And often there's a mismatch between what students may have learned at home and what they're learning at school. And in that sense as well, PoCSC provides that space for students to think through these encounters with their family members. And another practice, for example, in a conversation that I had with a student on campus, we do this activity called My Food Story. And it's a paragraph with fill in the blanks. And it asks you about what your first food was, who prepared it for you, the types of dishes that you grew up with in your household. And there was one student who did this activity at a retreat that PoCSC presented at, who shared that when he was growing up, his family often couldn't purchase meat, and now he's vegan. And there's this back and forth between the family and the student as, now you can afford it and why don't you eat meat? So this activity, going back to family and community, really brings up a lot for students in terms of how they were raised and how college is changing the understanding of themselves and then trying to communicate that back home. But I think it also says a lot about food justice and access to food and what does it mean to have a choice in your diet. Once you have access to more food, what does it mean then to have that choice, and what does it mean for when you didn't have that choice? So this is the work of PoCSC, to provide the space for these conversations to take place.
So I wanted to ask you, Carol, how often the subject of racism comes up in terms of the treatment that some of the people of color who are part of the collective or who are going to your events are expressing that they're experiencing regarding their sustainability practices?
It has come up, and certainly when the initiative started, these were the stories that were being brought to the advisors of the program of students feeling ashamed or embarrassed in interactions in courses, specifically courses that had to do with the environment or sustainability. And students were also expressing that they were having negative experiences with the sustainability culture on campus at large. Students were often, being made to feel ashamed or embarrassed for maybe not throwing their trash in the correct bin. So students were sharing they were having negative experiences with the sustainability culture on campus at large.
Was it because it was feeling very judgmental? Like, how could you not know that this is compost? And how could you not know? That kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that also says a lot Students of color are coming from different backgrounds than perhaps the students who learn about compost and the students who learn about recycling. So PoCSC also bridges that gap of saying, okay, we might not know about composting or we might not know about certain things that are often considered to be sustainable. It doesn't mean that students aren't engaging in other practices that are also sustainable.
So where can people go to learn more about the People of Color Sustainability Collective? I think you shared the website. Is that the best way for people to be in touch with you and with the collective in general?
The website is one way. We also have a Facebook page called the People of Color Sustainability Collective. And I would love it if people were to reach out to me as well. My office is on the 3rd floor of the Ethnic Resource Centers. And reaching out to the director of the American Indian Resource Center is another way to get in touch with us.
Carol, I wondered if you had any final comments that you would like to share.
I would like to invite everyone to our upcoming events. So as I mentioned, we have the Maya Harjo event in the winter quarter. Maya Harjo is the food waste coordinator at the Cultural Conservancy, and she'll be giving a talk on campus about seed preservation and its importance within Native American communities. And that will be taking place on February 20th. So please visit our website at the beginning of winter quarter. You'll be able to find more information there. And I would also like to invite everyone to the screening of the film Rumble, The Indians Who Rocked the World. This is an event that the American Indian Resource Center, in collaboration with KZSC, will be putting on, and it will be taking place on February 8th at 7 p.m. at the Theater Arts Media Theater. So I encourage everyone to come on out and meet everyone from PoCSC and the American Indian Resource Center, and I'd like to thank Silvana Falcon for the opportunity to be on KZSC.
It was great to have you on here. So Facebook page too, they should follow you on Facebook. Are you on any other social media?
Mainly Facebook.
Great. So everybody join the Facebook page. Thanks so much, Carol, for coming on.
Thank you.